Because my graduation's not in December. They prefer the degree. The flight to don't fly into Louisville. Fly to Mississippi, which is only
Family.
there's all of them. But then my friends are from New Orleans, so
The most fun when my daughter, she has her engineering degree.
under the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
Before we begin our meeting, I want to congratulate our administrative staff and all those that had a hand in making the first few days of our school year a success. Heard nothing but good things, and we're very proud that we got off to a great start.
Yes.
We have a public forum that we're going to start with. We've got two speakers. Mr. Frank Arredondo will speak first on safety.
You ready?
Madam President and members of the school board, I'm Frank Arredondo. I'm a member of the Police Chiefs Advisory Council. I'm here to talk about safety. We have a committee of the council here. With me here is James Bryant and Mr. Kindred, Nathan Kindred, who's going to speak after I do. I'm here because, like every parent and grandparents, we're concerned about the safety of our children in schools, especially in today's age when you have discipline problems, you have vaping, you have gangs within the school district, and we want to be sure that they stay safe. I myself have 3 children in the high school and 3 in the middle schools. And I tell you what, they're concerned. They bring me what happens in school. I have some that don't go to eat in the cafeteria. They go to the library, take their sandwich and their apple. And I think all of them wait till they get home and they rush in to use the restroom because they can't go in the bathroom, in the restrooms, and feel safe with what goes on in there. So I want everybody to know that the item on today's agenda, the SROs, I would hope that you support that program. We need that program. I know you've adopted the Marshals program, and I understand that's for the lower grades, and that's good. But at the high school and junior high, I know that you should also have a female officer if you can, so they can go into the restrooms. I want to know that my grandchildren arrive home safe. They have no problems, and they get what they're supposed to be getting is an education. And it's hard for them in some of the classrooms that they attend to have good teaching because of the conduct of some of the other students who make it hard for them to stay on point and on subject. So I implore you, I know that the school officers get paid a little bit more, but that's the pay grade that we have in the city. And those officers are trained to do a good job. And I implore you to accept that program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arredondo. Our second speaker, Nathaniel Kindred.
Good evening. My name is Nathaniel Kindred, and I'm a member of the Chiefs staff also. But I'm here as a parent. And my concerns is when I go to a basketball game, football game, or come to the school, you know, the teachers have to be monitoring all the doors, the crowd, and That's not what teachers do. That's what, we shouldn't have our teachers to do that, break up fights and all this. I notice in our gyms, we don't have a visitor sign or a home sign, according to the stadiums. But if we have these SROs on the campus, I think that will free up all the teachers. They can take their break a long lunch. And so the longer we put it off, the worse it's going to get. So you need to stop the ball from rolling and adopt a policy to take care of this and give your teachers some time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Gonna move on.
Do we have any?
Huh? No. It was only those two, right? Gonna move on to reports and informational items. Academic update.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Cardona. Before we get into our academic update for this evening, I would like to present to you all our campus administrators for this year. We have our principals and our assistant principals here this evening, and we would just like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves to you so that you know who they are and the great work that they're going to be doing leading our campuses this year.
Cute, are they?
Wow.
They lined up alphabetically.
That's cute.
Good evening. I'm Elogia Martinez. I'm the principal at Bonham, and this is Hilda Rager. She's the assistant principal.
Should put him in front, take a picture of him.
Good evening, Board. I'm Pam Thomas, the principal of Bowie, and this is my partner, Edna Pettis.
Good evening. My name is Annalisa Holmes. I'm the proud principal of Crockett Elementary. My partner in crime is feeling under the weather, but she sends her regards. Her name is Megan O'Neill.
Good evening. I am Nicole Aricio. I'm the principal at Zavala, and this is our assistant principal, Miss Suzanne Perkins. And if you saw us at convocation, you saw us getting down. Thank you. Hi, good evening, board. I am Jennifer Gonzalez, the principal at Hernandez, and this is my assistant principal, Miss Melissa Sandoval. Hello, I'm Christina Woody. I'm the principal of Mendez, and this is our assistant principal, Stephanie Jones.
Good evening, board. My name is Cash Greathouse. I'm the proud principal at Rodriguez Elementary, and this is my assistant principal, Ms. Jean Hagugi.
Good evening, board. My name is Scott Messini. I'm the proud principal at Travis Elementary, and this is our new assistant principal, Ms. Connie Blanda.
All right, good evening, board. Marcus Olivares, a good night. We have a new team with us this year. Kayla Kirk has transitioned to our academic support specialist. We have Reagan Costable. She's one of our new assistant principals at 8th grade. Brenda Sandoval is our administrator assistant principal at 7th grade. And then we have Pablo Garcia, our assistant principal for 6th grade. Really excited about the year.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Marilyn Young, and I am the principal at the fabulous Miller Middle School. And I have a wonderful team here, and we're all new. And so I have Miss Jessica Berry, I have Miss Michelle Marino, I have Mr. Mark DeLeon, and I have Christina McDaniels.
Hello, Yvette Velasquez. I'm stuck in between middle school and high school. I am the DAP principal for the district, and I've been here for 17 years, 30 years in the community, graduated 4 kids from here, so very proud parent and member of the district. Thank you.
Blair Hartley, I'm the assistant principal at St. Marcus High School. Cynthia Reinhardt is our principal. She is not here tonight. We have Miss Shay Bird, assistant principal, Olivia Short, assistant principal, Lydia Englehart, assistant principal, Joseph Martinez, Arlene Hooper, and Amadeo Villanueva.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. I'm Beth Nash, Director of Data and Accountability. We're going to be presenting the accountability section first, and then Dr. Sanders will follow up with the other part of the academics update. This presentation is solely based on our preliminary data. As of right now, we still don't have the final everything that's going to be coming out. And we'll get into some more of the specifics moving forward. And just know that this is one of the presentations I'll be doing, as well as one in September, and then at the special board meeting. Let's go. Our first slide that we have is all about the lemons that we had this past year and how to make lemonade from these. Some different things that we had to encounter was, first of all, STAR 2.0. For the first time in many, many years, our students were exposed to an assessment that was unlike something they'd ever seen before. It's no longer just multiple choice A, B, C, D. At this time, no more than 75 points can come from multiple choice, meaning some students may have seen more than 25% of their assessment from those new item types. And that's across all contents, all grades. Every single student encountered this change. CCMR is something that's been a changing cut point and threshold throughout this entire past school year. And as I stand here tonight, we still do not know the exact specifics because they have not finalized the 2023 Accountability Manual. The school year's already finished, the students are already gone. We still don't have the official manual of how we're going to be graded. Teacher morale's been tough across the board. We all know that. We've done the best we can to support our teachers. We've had the legislative session that's been kind of this overshadowing occurrence that unfortunately education hasn't had a lot of good positives. We had House Bill 4545. It was the mandate that our students who aren't successful in STAR had to receive accelerated instruction. That wasn't necessarily a funded mandate by the House, but we had to do it anyway. And now that's been updated with House Bill 1416. So once again, another change, another pivot. And then last but not least is the A through F refresh. And that is still, like I said, we still do not have the final what's going to count, what is it going to look like, how will things be factored. That should be coming out in the middle of September. Middle could be the 10th, it could be the 16th. So at our next board meeting, I may or may not have that information just yet, but we will be sharing what we do have. So those are just some of the things we've had to use to make lemonade this year, and our campuses did a very good job in doing that. One thing that I want to show everyone is the data that's used by the state to compare campuses. I know a lot of times in a district of our size, we often compare one school to another because that's what we have to go off of. But according to what the state has, they do not even compare one of our campuses to another because our 7 elementaries are that different from one another that they're not in the comparison groups. Same thing for our 2 middle schools. So in your board books on page 44, starting there, you actually have a full list of the 40 comparison groups for every single campus. And these are campuses that have similar demographics based on enrollment numbers, our eco-dis percentages, our emergent bilingual population, our mobility rates, and our special education numbers. What will be interesting to see is once we have public accountability scores, looking across that group of 40, how did those other schools do and compared to how did we do? And that's really what we're going to need to really ground ourselves in, especially as knowing that our own campus demographics across the elementaries, they're so vastly different. It's not always fair to compare one campus to another. And that's something I really want to drive home for the school board as well as the public, that we can't expect all 7 elementaries to all be at the exact same level when the demographics are this different. What we have to go off of as of right now does look similar to last year in terms of the overall domains and what the domains look like for our elementary and middle schools. That's this slide right here. You'll see that we have 3 domains. There's 4 little semicircles or Pac-Man charts. This is what the lead forward people call this, this chart because they look like little Pac-Men. But the first one is solely based on student achievement in STAR. And once again, this is for elementary and middle school. And so it's only based on STAR, and we're looking at students at the approaches, meets, and masters. And a lot of times that's really the only performance level that's really shown across the media, is how did our students do in just that one domain? Well, there's 2 whole other domains to look at as well. The next domain is actually broken into two parts. It's either academic growth or it's STAR performance as it relates to relative performance. So once again, you'll see STAR is 100% of that relative performance, and that is where we take how our students did on STAR and cross-reference it with our eco-DIS population. So it does take into account that the higher your eco-DIS population is, the lower you can perform as a school and still receive a high grade. STAR academic growth is something we're going to highlight tonight as much as I possibly can. That's looking at how did students grow from one year to the next. Now, the state has made changes in how they're proposed to calculate STAR growth. So even this, what I'm sharing with you is what we've been told this far. Next month, there may be some slight tweaks to what we have. And then lastly, domain 3 is all about closing the achievement gaps. This is the area that probably had the biggest change with how it's being calculated. This was based on 14 student groups possibly last year and the previous years. This year moving forward, they're only looking at 4 student groups. And it's also going from a yes, no, all or nothing point system to now a gradated point system. So there are a lot of moving pieces in this, and here's where you can see for elementary and middle school, it's almost made up entirely of STAR information, with the exception of 10% that goes to our EL proficiency measure, and that's our TELPUS testers. Looking at high school accountability, the overall looks very similar, but high school has CCMR and graduation rate also included for domains 1 and domains 2B, as well as closing the achievement gaps. And just a reminder overall that closing the gaps counts for 30% of the school's overall accountability. The other 70% comes from the highest of those first 2 domains, so the first 3 categories. Okay. Now as we get into the actual data, the first view I'm going to be showing is going to be a bar chart over time showing 2019 is the gray, that is prior to COVID. 2020 is missing, that was the year of COVID, and then the past 3 years. This shows a different group of kids every single year, so it's not the same group of students moving in, it's a different cohort from year to year. The thing to look at here, we have going from left to right, just to get you oriented with this presentation, we have the state level for approaches grade level versus the district level for approaches. Reminder, approaches is a passing standard. Then you have the state level at meets with our district level of meets, and then a state level of masters versus the district's level of masters. Things to point out here is how we are closing the gap between our averages with the state averages. For example, if you look at 2022, we were 16 points below the state at approaches. This past year, we were 10 percentage points below the state at approaches. So while we're still below the state, we are making growth. And what you will see consistently across this presentation, our data lines, our trend lines, mirror that of the states. And in certain areas, we are making up more growth than the state has as a whole. Also a reminder, this was our first year having new curriculum for math and language arts at the elementary level. So that's something else to take into consideration as well. Looking at 4th grade math, you'll see similar trends here. 4th grade across the board was the area in math in which our district struggled the most in terms of having trend lines that weren't exactly with the state. You'll see that we dropped slightly at approaches, whereas the state remained the same. At meets, the state went up slightly, we went up just a little bit. At masters, the state dropped by 1, we dropped by 1. So once again, very similar trend lines overall. And now this is the fun part starting at 4th grade and up. These are now our current 5th graders. These students last year took the 4th grade. 2 years ago, they took the 3rd grade test. So you can now see as a group of students moving up, as 3rd graders, they were at 55% approaches, they went down 1 percentage point. Looking at our meets and masters though, both of those areas grew by 2 percentage points. So in taking into consideration the changing of the format of the test, that right there is showing that our students are making growth. Our students at the meets and masters level are maintaining and continuing to perform and show that growth, and we know what needs to be done with approaches. Here is our 5th grade math. You'll notice 5th grade math in the 2019, that approaches level is extremely high. That is the last year we had SSI, which was the Student Success Initiative, where if students did not pass the administration in April, they then were able to take it again in May with intensive remediation between those 2 points. And if students passed in May, that data was also included to show that. So that's why the gray is extremely high for approaches. But you'll see afterwards, this is a great area of celebration looking here at how much room we made up at the approaches level, where 2 years ago, we were, 16 points below the state, and now we're only 7 points below the state. So growth is happening across the board. Our students are growing, even though that's not always the narrative that the public wants to paint. And this is where it's exciting to see this next comparison slide, You can see how this group of students went from third graders at 46% approaches, to fourth graders at 57% approaches, to fifth graders at 72%. So you can see, yes, they came in low as third graders. Keep in mind what was happening 2 years prior to that with COVID. Our students are making the growth. Our campuses are growing our students. The growth is there. You'll see it as well as at the meets level, going from 16 to 30 to 38. And then masters, while the 14 to 14 looks like they didn't improve any, well, the students also didn't go backwards. So that in and of itself is a win. Looking at fifth grade science, science and social studies are those standalone tests, so we do not have any sort of growth data to show on these. You'll see that the state dropped slightly at approaches, as did we. At meets, both the state and the district went down. And at masters, while they both went down, we are 1 point from being at the state average for masters for science. So and there are several campuses. When we get into the campus data in subsequent presentations, we have a lot of individual campus celebrations where they are at or above the state averages across the board. As we get into reading language arts, I do want to also bring up the fact that the reading language arts test now includes reading and writing TEKS for the first time. In 2021, the writing test was a standalone test in fourth grade and seventh grade. Last year in 2022, the students had field questions on their reading test, but those questions did not count towards their overall score. Now this year, not only do they have a newly designed STAR test, but the TEKS that they're being assessed on are reading and writing TEKS all interwoven together. So that is going to account for why we didn't necessarily see some of the growth across RLA like we did in math. But I think when you take into consideration how our students have struggled with writing historically, now that writing is part of the test, it's going to make sense that our students aren't going to have the same level of growth as what we would hope to see. Looking at, go back to third grade. So looking at third grade RLA, the state stayed about the same at approaches, as did we. State at meet was the same, we dropped it slightly. The state at masters dropped by 10%, as did we. So once again, our trend lines are right in line with the state. Fourth grade RLA, you'll see the very similar things again. The state stayed pretty stagnant at approaches, as did we. At meets, both the state and us dropped, as well as the master's level. Looking at the cohort data, however, you'll see that these students who are now our current fifth graders, in third grade, they were at 69% approaches, going up to 72%, so that is a growth there. The meets did go backwards, as well as the masters, but I think with the amount of dipping that the state had as well, that's to be expected. And once we're able to present to you how the scaling has changed on what are the new performance levels for approaches, meets, masters, I think we're going to see that that masters column is a much smaller number of questions versus it was previously a little bit larger group to be able to get into. Fifth grade RLA, 81% for approaches for the state. We dropped slightly, going down 3 percentage points. Looking at the meets level, the state dropped by 2, we dropped by 7. At masters, the state dropped by 8, we also dropped by 8. And then here is that cohort. These are our current sixth graders that are now at the middle schools. And this is another one. It's great to see the growth from how they went from third grade at 59% approaches to 71 to 75. And that's what we need to keep in perspective, because this is also part of accountability. This is domain 2A, this is growth. So our students are showing that growth. Same thing, you'll see at that meets level, a slight dip there, but at masters they went up by 2 percentage points. So that concludes our elementary section. We're going to get into middle school. Now, middle school, before I can begin to show you the data, we're going to have story time about the changes we've made over the years to middle school math, because part of understanding the data is knowing where we've been with math and where we're planning to go. What are our plans for this year? So in 2019 was our first year of algebra for all at the 8th grade level. The remaining students took their grade level STAR, with the exception of those 7th graders who were also choosing to accelerate and go into algebra. And that year, the geometry students were the only students on campus who took grade 8 math. That was also the last year of SSI, meaning that the handful of students who did not pass the 8th grade STAR were able to retest. So on a graph you'll see here later on, we do have one year where 100% of our students passed the grade 8 math. That is why. Next year we have COVID, so nothing going on there. 2021, we continue algebra for all. But now we can move to make some other shifts. At this point, the 6th graders who were taking the pre-AP or the advanced sections, they now were being exposed to 6th grade TEKS and 7th grade TEKS, and they took the 7th grade math STAR. The 7th graders are being exposed to 7th grade TEKS and 8th grade TEKS, and now they're taking the grade 8 math with still that one group of students, if they're choosing to accelerate in 7th grade for algebra, they take the algebra EOC. Our geometry students continue to take the Math 8 star. That's due to ESSA. Every student must take a reading and a math assessment every year, and since there's not a geometry EOC, grade 8 is what those students have to take. This was the plan as well for 2022. Last year, we had some slight changes to this. Algebra for all became algebra for the majority. We'd run into some issues in 2022 realizing that we have some students that just are not ready for algebra as 8th graders for whatever reason. We also have students who move into us middle of the year from other districts and they have not taken the first semester of Algebra 1. If they have not taken the first semester of Algebra 1, they cannot go into algebra in the spring semester and take the assessment. Even if they're cognitively able to, it's not allowed by the state. So we were having students that were coming in as 8th graders having to go take math with 7th grade students. You can imagine how well that went over. So this past year, both of our middle schools had sections of Math 8 that were offered for a student for a variety of reasons. Okay? Also last year, the entire 6th grade took the 6th grade Math Star. Now we still had our advanced sections learning the TEKS from 6th and 7th grade, but at the end of the year, they took the 6th grade Math Star. Our 7th graders continued to take the grade 8 star. They were receiving the 7th and 8th grade TEKS, with the exception of those 7th graders in algebra who took the algebra EOC. And once again, geometry students all take the Math 8 star. This year, we are continuing algebra for the majority. So for the most part, all 8th graders will be in algebra, with the exception of those groups of students who need to be in Math 8 for various reasons. The 6th graders in math will continue to learn 6th and 7th grade TEKS, but they will be taking the 6th grade star at the end of the year. And to support our 7th graders who are learning 7th grade and 8th grade TEKS all in 1 year, math is being double blocked at the middle school level. They did not have to lose an elective to make this happen. We did not have to ask for additional teachers to make this happen. We made this work with what we have on campus. And every single 7th grader is able to have their same math teacher for 2 periods. It's not necessarily a 90-minute block back to back, but it is the same 25 students in class for 1 period. They all go out, they all come back later on and continue on with the 5E model. So it's allowing the students that deeper understanding on the same day with the same teacher to truly grasp and understand our content that we have, as well as letting the teacher have a chance to get to know those students on a much deeper level, because now those teachers, instead of having 6 different classes with 25 to 30 students, they essentially have 3 sections of students that they have to form those relationships with. So we can expect our teachers to have much closer relationships, and that response to a student need will go through the roof. Our 7th graders who are in algebra will continue to take the algebra EOC, and our geometry students will continue to take the Math 8 star. So that is our response to where math has been and where math is this current year. And with that, I get into the data. 6th grade math, now it dipped in the years when we had our advanced students taking the 7th grade. So we anticipate that 21 and 22 data is not the prettiest. And 2023, we are recovering. So 2023 was back to where all students were taking the 6th grade Math Star. And this is an area that we know we need to show growth in. We're behind the state, about 15 percentage points. Our meets is behind, as well as our masters. Okay. I mentioned that the 7th graders did not have to lose an elective to make the double blocking happen. So this means that our 6th graders and 8th graders all have a class called Rattler Enrichment, where we're able to really fine-tune what it is that those students need. For our 6th graders, learning how to be a middle school student. For our 8th graders, it's preparing for high school. But it's also time to provide our students with the interventions that they need through our various programs that we have, our high-quality instructional materials, our ed tech programs, so the students can really target the areas that they are needing moving forward. And this is another time that we can have some support to help our math teachers, because our teachers only see our 6th graders and 8th graders 1 time a day. Looking at the comparison data, these are our current 7th graders. You can see from 4th grade to 5th grade, they had a tremendous jump. They went back slightly. Looking at the meets level, you'll see the same thing, tremendous jump, and they regressed, and then at masters as well. So we know these students have great potential. They showed a lot of growth going from 4th to 5th. We're looking forward to having these are now our 7th graders, them having that double block of math to really get them back where they need to be and to extend their learning so they can fully master the 7th and 8th grade TEKS. Now, I skipped over the 7th grade math comparison because this past year, the only students who would have taken our 7th grade math were our students who moved in late in the spring semester from other schools who'd been learning 7th grade math year-round, and it was appropriate to test them. Since these were students who moved into us late, they will not count on our accountability report, so I did not include them for that reason. But looking here at our 8th grade math, here's where you'll see that 100% from back when we had only geometry students taking the assessment. But then moving forward, you'll see the other years that we've had here. 8th grade math, this is something that we hopefully will see this rebound this year, because now the students who will take this test are our current 7th graders who are in that double blocked math. So I'm really excited to see how this graphic will grow throughout the year, and even throughout the years we progress monitor how is this group of students doing as it compares to the historical data of this test. Now, and I no longer have the comparison charts such as these right here, because now at this point our students all begin to take the different strands of math, and it is extremely hard to show that entire cohort together. So that's why moving forward, this is the last cohort chart that you're going to see in the presentation. Looking at our 8th grade science. Science, you'll see that the state dropped by 2 percentage points. We actually went up at approaches by 4. At meets, the state and the district both remained the same. And at masters, the state dropped by 8, we dropped by 5. So once again, this is an area where we are making trends to get closer to that state average, and otherwise we can have the same trend lines at meets and masters. Going into reading language arts, once again, a reminder, this is now the first time we've had reading and writing TEKS assessed on the same assessment. But with that, you'll see that at the 6th grade RLA level, the state grew by 5 percentage points. We grew by 8. You'll see at the meets level, the state went up as well as we did. And then at masters, there was a slight drop, as we did as well. So once again, continuing those trend lines and showing that we are catching up to the state averages. Now, since we're back to reading, I do have these charts now, I apologize. You can see here the 4th to 5th to 6th. There has historically been a drop from the 5th grade RLA to the 6th grade. Part of that is their students are moving from the elementary time schedule of having X number of minutes throughout the day for reading language arts versus middle school, very different looking bell schedule. But statewide, there has always been a historical drop going from 5th grade to 6th grade. So looking here, once again, you'll see that we are in line with the state. Our meets dropped 58 to 51, and then our masters did decline. So that's definitely an area that we can focus on for our high achieving students. What didn't work well in 6th grade, and how can we fix that for this year's 6th graders? 7th grade RLA, you'll see the state dropped by 3 percentage points. We went up by 4. The state at meets dropped by 4. We actually went up by 7. And the state at masters dropped by 11. We only dropped by 3. So 7th grade RLA, our teachers have made up some ground and have done some impressive work here. And looking at this cohort group, this is where you can see as 5th graders, they were at 67. They dropped down as 6th graders. They're back up as 7th graders. You'll see the same thing at the meets level. And then masters, we're not quite back to where they were as 5th graders, but they are making that improvement going upwards. And once again, considering it is reading and writing TEKS, both included on a new format, growth is something to celebrate. 8th grade RLA, the state dropped by 1 percentage point at approaches. The district went up by 4. The state dropped at meets by 2. We went up by 1. The state dropped by 10 percentage points at masters. We dropped by 8. So once again, at approaches and meets, we're doing well. At the masters level, though, both us and the state did struggle. So once again, these are the current 9th graders coming into the high school. They will be taking English 1 in May. 8th grade social studies. You can see that the state dropped by 1 percentage point. We as a district went up by 9 percentage points. And this is a test that, if you've never looked at a released social studies assessment, it is extremely challenging. And this is really, it's more of a reading test first and foremost, but knowing the content, this is an extremely difficult test. So to see that level of growth at the approaches level is a great win for our 8th grade history teachers. The state at meets stayed constant at 31%. We grew by 5 percentage points. The state dropped at their master's level. We gained at the master's level. So we're now just 2 percentage points below the state for our masters for 8th grade social studies. I did include our EOC numbers as well. I know when I presented previously, I only presented the 1-year snapshot. So now here are the historical, your previous 4 years. For algebra EOC, this does include the middle schools and the high school mixed in together. But you can see that upward trend at approaches, where we are getting much closer to that state average. At the meets level, the state increased slightly, we maintained the same. At masters, the state dropped, we dropped as well. What we're doing with the middle school double blocking 7th grade math will pay off with the algebra. It won't be something we necessarily see in large impact this next year or this current year, but the following will. Those will be the students who come up having had 2 classes for 7th grade math, and we'll expect to see our middle schools most definitely above the state average. Our English 1 EOC information. You can see the changes here as well. The state went up. At approaches, we dipped slightly. The state at meet went up, we dipped slightly. The state at masters went up, we dipped slightly. We know we have our work cut out for us with English 1. And we also know that this is an area we have our 8th graders coming in are doing well with English. And so continuing what we have, that momentum with those students to make sure that they're able to do well on this type of assessment. And once again, the EOCs also had the new item types as well. It wasn't just 3 through 8. So it was every single star assessment that had the overhaul. Our English 2 numbers are better than English 1. You can see approaches, the state grew a little bit, as did we. At meets, the state went up by 1, we dropped by 2. At masters, the state's been pretty low overall, and then we've been fairly right there with them. So that master's level is challenging for all students across the whole state. Our biology, this is an area where the state went up by 6 percentage points, we went up by 8. The meets, the state increased slightly, as did we. At masters, the state remained about the same, as did we. So once again, similar trend lines with the approaches gaining on the state average. And then our U.S. history EOC, you'll see historically the numbers have been extremely high across all levels. And once again, our district's numbers match the trends of the state. Important dates moving forward. At our next board meeting, I hope by then we will have the finalized A through F accountability manual. I will have prepped in your board books what's available at time of publication whenever it's needed, but then I may slightly tweak my presentation if information comes out between the deadline for the board book versus the actual board presentation. On September 26th, the district will receive our A through F scores, and those will be the scores to be compared with our what if scores from 2022. September 28th, A through F scores will be available statewide at txschools.gov. And then at October 2nd, I anticipate that we'll be presenting those scores to you at a special board meeting with more detailed information coming in those subsequent meetings. At this time, are there any questions?
Any questions? Any questions, Ms. Halsey? Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. She's very precise. She does a good job with her report.
So now that we have the data in front of us of how we performed last year, it's important that we focus on what is our plan for this year. So I have the pleasure of presenting our academic priorities for this school year. First of all, our primary focus is on Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 instruction is the guaranteed instruction that approximately 80% of all students receive. So if you look there, we have the pyramid that shows, and this is something that goes with the multi-tiered system of support model that shows the Tier 1, which is the core instruction, Tier 2, which is typically about 15% of students who need that target intervention. Tier 3, the intensive intervention, which is about 5% if my math is correct. But today we're just going to focus on just the Tier 1 instruction. We're going to talk about things that we've done over the course of the summer in preparation for our leaders and our teachers to address Tier 1 instruction. First of all, back in June, we held our first ever Instructional Leadership Symposium, which was an opportunity for all of our campus leaders and district leaders to come together and really hone in on what are the priorities when it comes to Tier 1 instruction. Some things to note about Tier 1 instruction: first and foremost, you have to have the right materials in the hands of our teachers and our students in order for it to work. The materials that used, they must be research-based and evidence-based. We are fortunate through the efforts of our board to have Materials. Last year at elementary level, we saw that we implemented Amplify for reading and Eureka for math. In addition to that, we have McGraw-Hill's at secondary level. So all of the materials that we're using, we're making sure that they're vetted and that they're aligned to the TEKS. So we're moving away from just going on the internet and finding resources that may not be aligned. Another important piece of Tier 1 instruction is having that diagnostic assessment. And the diagnostic assessment gives us a great indicator of where our students are currently performing. Although we know we had STAR data back in May, a lot of changes have happened since then. A lot of students possibly grew academically from May to August. So our schools are currently in the process of implementing beginning of the year assessments, and they will use this data to be able to group their students to provide that support. Throughout the year, we will have progress monitoring that takes place. It's commonly referred to as beginning of the year testing, middle of the year assessment, end of the year assessment, and that allows our teachers and our principals an opportunity to see the progress that our students are making over a period of time, looking at multiple indicators. So when we think about Tier 1 instruction and the priorities that we have as a district, there are 4 things that we want to focus on with our schools. The first one is professional learning communities, most commonly referred to as PLCs. We have positive behavior intervention systems or supports, PBIS. We have observation and feedback. Then we have instructional keys, which is Wicker, which is part of AVID. And Wicker is the writing, the inquiry, the collaboration, the organization, and the reading. So these are all the elements that we've determined if we can do well in these 4 specific areas, we should be able to see a closing of the achievement gap that currently exists in our district between some of our students. As Ms. Nash indicated earlier, we cannot necessarily compare all of our schools to each other. They are based on a set of indicators that the state has, but we also do want to make sure that we're seeing growth from all of our students. So these are the 4 things. And I'll briefly just touch on each one of them, what we're looking at. So with PLCs is nothing new. It's been around for years and years and years. But what we wanted to do this year was, instead of focusing on the what that we're teaching, which we know are our TEKS. The TEKS are the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, that's our standards. We want to instead focus on how we're teaching things, making sure during those meetings that teachers are getting the opportunity to rehearse and practice in front of each other and get feedback from each other. We don't want the first time a lesson to be taught is on our students when that's game time. So we really want to emphasize that rehearsal time during PLC meetings. When it comes to positive behavior intervention systems and support, this year we had an excellent opportunity to engage all of our teachers and all of our administrators in CHAMPS training. This happened 2 weeks ago before school started. And it was a way for us to create some consistent systems across the district in terms of expectations for behavior and management. One of the things that we really want to emphasize is the respect factor. We want to see the respect that exists from student to student, teacher to student, and student to teacher. And so CHAMPS, which is a part of the Safe and Civil Schools Foundation, provided different ways to help teachers get prepared to address those things in their classroom this year. It's a K-8 model for CHAMPS, and for high school 9 through 12, it's called Discipline in Secondary Classrooms. But it is our hope that over time, if students are exposed to this throughout the elementary and middle years, we have a foundation laid by the time they get to high school when it comes to classroom management and expectations. Observation and feedback. Also, during our Instructional Leadership Symposium, we emphasized the need to provide our teachers with good, solid, quality feedback. We want to move away from making judgment statements that I like this or I like that. We want to have real facts. This is what I saw, and this is the feedback that I'm giving you to help improve your practice. And then last but certainly not least, our instructional keys. Part of our instructional playbook is emphasizing the need to have a set of consistent practices across the district. We have district curriculum instructional specialists and coaches across the campuses, and one of the things that's very important when you have those individuals, you have to have a consistent model in place. We have support from Region 13, which is our coaching model. But if we have every school doing a different model, it's very hard to support the schools. So we're very pleased to say that this year we have an instructional playbook that comes with some high leverage impact strategies that we'll be utilizing in the classrooms. Key performance indicators, or commonly KPI, are the metrics that we're going to be using this year to be able to determine if we're seeing progress. We should not wait until the end of the year to say that one test, STAR, has determined whether we've seen progress over the course of this year. We have a number of indicators that gives us opportunities to see how well we're growing, how fast we're growing, what changes we need to make. It's also important not to get hung up on one type of data. We know student achievement data is the most important data because that's why we exist, to make sure our students are learning. But we can't forget about perception data. What is the perception from our students and our families about the school that they're attending? We can't forget about our resource data. Our number one resource, our teachers. Are we able to fill all of our classrooms with highly qualified teachers? What do their observation and feedback say about how they're performing in the classroom? And then our demographic data. So over the course of our next couple of months, we'll be bringing you at different points in time, different indicators. September, of course, is National Attendance Awareness Month, so we will be driving home a campaign to increase our attendance. It's also Dropout Prevention Month because we have a state deadline where we've got to recover as many students as we possibly can by the end of September. So all of those are metrics that we're going to be looking at, and we'll be bringing you data to show you where we're doing well in those areas and what work we need to do to get better. But this will be the instructional playbook that we will use throughout this school year to improve our Tier 1 instruction. And if we really can improve that Tier 1 instruction, we're going to start to see those scores really improve over time. And that concludes our academic update. So do you have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Have you already identified those students that didn't make it over from the middle schools to the high school?
The students, I'm sorry?
The students that didn't show up from 8th grade to 9th grade, has those students been identified?
Yes, that is currently what we're working on. I met all of the secondary principals to those lists. And so there are a couple creative ways that we're going about in addition to just phone calls, because that oftentimes is not the best way. So we are looking at some things to do to be more creative and try to recover those students by that September 30th deadline.
In the past, the counselors and parent liaisons, a group of people would go out with a list door to door to knock on the door and get them back in school.
Yes, that's the grad walk that we're looking at now. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little more about the Dropout Recovery Program? So is that for students that didn't graduate last year and we're re-engaging them? Is that who we're targeting in that program?
So it's any student who did not, there's a number of different things.
Mm-hmm.
One, you didn't graduate. Two, you're not enrolled in another school. Three, you're still alive, and we just can't find you for whatever reason. If you're in the between grades 7 and 12, if we cannot locate you on that date, and again, there are multiple things that have not been met, you will be considered a dropout. And so we have to make sure that we do everything in our power to bring those students back to school.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Halsey, did you have a question? Anyone else? Thank you very much. So you'll keep us up to date on the students you found and the numbers?
Yes, ma'am. We'll have the numbers for you next month.
Okey-dokey. Thank you. So we're ready for our quarterly and annual investment report. Mr. Doyle?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, board. Beginning on page 53 of your board book, you'll see the fourth quarter investment report. The dates are from April 1st, 23 to June 30th of 23. Some highlights that I want to point out for that quarter. You can see in the general fund, our interest earnings was a little over $913,000. If you look at the next page, again, over that quarter, fourth quarter, you can see within our debt service pools, our interest earnings was a little over $290,000. If you then turn to page 59 in your board book, you'll see the annual investment report for fiscal year 22-23. On page 59, you'll see that's our all funds report. You can see that all of our funds generated an interest rate, or an interest earning, excuse me, a little over $3.2 million. Next page, you'll see over our fiscal year 22-23, you can see that within our general fund, our interest earnings were a little over $2.3 million. And again, reporting on the debt service side, within our fiscal year, you can see our earnings, interest earnings of $691,000.
Questions? Thank you. We're ready to go into the consent agenda items, and we have a new corrected sheet in yellow on the items that can be approved. So the consent items first had a mixture of construction and other items that needed to be approved. We can take A through D and then take E all together, since we have talked about many of those. And then we'll, the largest number, and then we'll go into our items for action. But in terms of consent, if we wanted to take A, B, C, D separately, we can, or we can take them all together, whatever is the pleasure of the board. Now, construction, I would suggest, since we've talked about so many of these items and we're just trying to get on the legal side on these, we can take those in a group, 1 through 14. So we can start with the minutes for the regularly scheduled board meeting on June 19th.
Madam Vice President, I move that we approve the minutes for the regular board meeting on June 19th, as well as the special board meeting on August 1st. It's presented in the board book.
Second. I heard a second from Sandra. Okay. We have a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0. Grading guidelines.
I move that we approve the grading guidelines, which are presented in the board book and are unchanged from previous.
Second. We'll have a second from Ms. Kane. All in favor, raise your hand. 7-0 opposed. Consider acceptance of the certified T-test appraisers for San Marcos CISD.
I move that we accept the T-test appraisers that were presented in the board book.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0.
Clem, the next item is a new item from TEA, and I would request that you could give us some explanation for it, please.
Consideration of possible action on open records of 10 blackout dates.
Yes, so we're required by law now to publicly list the 10 days that the community has when they do open records requests. Typically, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, we're going to select the dates the community knows that those will not be part of the 10 days or 20 days that we have to respond.
So this has to do with the open records request?
Yes.
Questions or comments? Anyone?
Andrew, did I mess anything up there?
No, we're doing 2 days in November, 6 days in December, and 2 over spring break.
Thank you for the explanation, and I move that we approve the open records blackout days as presented in the board book.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Villapando, did you second? Yes. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0 opposed. Now we could take the construction all together. I know that Perkins and Will is here. Don't know if anybody else is here from one of the other. Mr. Sandoval?
It's
did you
just a
have-
motion.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I'll make the motion to approve items E through
1 through,
E through R.
E through R on the consent agenda, which is all construction stuff that was approved by the bonds.
okay, maybe on the original one, they had letters. This one, On the yellow one, it's 1 through 14.
Oh, okay, okay.
On
So you
the
got it.
revised one, we're
Okay.
voting on
I'm
one.
looking at my agenda from,
Construction items 1 through 14. We have a motion. Who seconded? Ms. Kane seconded. All in favor, raise your hands. 7. Opposed? 0. And that brings us to items for action, Board of Trustees.
I didn't realize the police chief is here. The police
We
chief's
have-
sitting back there until the very end.
We haven't gotten to those.
what is he?
Go to the SRO. Maybe you want him sitting here all board meeting or?
No.
It's on?
I didn't
So
realize
we
the
should
chief
move
of
that
police
one up. Let me find it. I'm in trouble focusing.
Item D, the safety.
Huh? Wait a minute. I'm having trouble focusing. D,
So it's
since we have the
7D.
police chief waiting in the audience, we can move up D.
7D. Safety.
On
7D.
Item 7, items for action under 7. D, safety, consider approval of school resource officer program interlocal agreement between San Marcos CISD and City of San Marcos, acting by and through the San Marcos Police Department.
Good evening, Stan Standers, Police Chief, here for the annual renewal of the interlocal agreement. Nothing has changed, but for the benefit of our citizens, you should know that we currently employ 5 school resource officers, and of course, you have many more campuses. Hence the concept of the school marshal program, which the School Board of Trustees adopted. So thank you for that. The school resource officers have been equally busy, along with staff, and it's been a good school year thus far. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any.
Anyone? We're ready for a motion? Mr. Shanks?
I make a motion that we approve the local agreement with the San Marcos, between the San Marcos CISD and the City of San Marcos Police Department for the school resource officer program.
I'll second that.
Have a second? All in favor, please raise your hand. 7, 0 opposed. Thank you, Chief. Now we can go back to item 7. You're welcome. Items for action, Board of Trustees, discussion and possible action to include all speech language pathologists and LSSPs on the longevity pay incentive program. This was an item brought to us by Dr. Salmi, and administration has worked on this for us. Do we want to hear from the superintendent on it? Or do
Yeah,
we want to hear
Miss-
from Ms. Munoz?
Ms. Munoz and Ms. Peterson.
Good evening, Board. I'm Stephanie Munoz, Interim Chief of Human Resources. And after reviewing with TASB for our salary information that they do each year, working with our special ed director, our team made the recommendation in the budget that you approved in June to make adjustments to our LSSPs and to our SLPs and to our diagnosticians. And so we looked at market data, we looked at our neighbors around us, and we did make adjustments up to 6% for these staff members to work on retention. So this has already been done. We will make communication with those individuals this week to let them know specifically how their pay was affected. Any questions?
So we're not going to be voting on this item since this has been taken care of by administration, and we appreciate you
Yes,
paying
ma'am.
attention to the LSSPs because they have very specialized training.
We agree. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to keep as many as we can. Number 2, discussion and possible action to form a subcommittee to investigate actions needed to create an SMCISD police force. I don't know who.
Dr. Salmi.
Dr. Salmi, was that
Yeah.
your item?
Yeah, it was, thank you. Yeah, we were informed by the chief of police a few months ago that he's been unable to hire additional school resource officers, and we've all seen the results of surveys. that program has been very successful in San Marcos and very well supported by our community at large. I'd like to see the school board participate in a subcommittee with the administration to investigate what actions will be necessary for us to create our own school police force so that we can have officers at all of our schools who are fully trained, who are properly equipped and uniformed on campuses and at extracurricular activities to replace what we've recently enacted as a school marshal program. And I'd like to propose that we have 3 board members participate in whatever subcommittee is proposed, constituents proposed by the administration. And I'm making a motion to create such a subcommittee.
Okay, you're
Making a motion.
Yeah, I would like to move to create such a subcommittee consisting of 3 board members and additional administrative recommendations.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Mr. Shanks seconds. Okay, any further questions or discussion from
I have
anyone?
one.
Yes.
So I would also like to add on to that there's a comparison between what a district police force would look like in comparison to the Marshall program. So I want this committee to evaluate that, the pros and cons. That way, when we do a report and give it to the public, you know, they'll see the pros and cons between the two versus just coming out with a plan for one or the other.
Okay, so any other questions or discussion?
No, and I'm happy to amend the motion to include comparison to Marshall program, between Marshall program and school police force.
And I second that.
You second her amendment. You're seconding her amendment.
Yes.
For the purpose of discussion, I'd like to see this move quickly, so I'd also like for us to talk about, if possible, committee membership from the board.
Okay, but first, let's go back and vote to see if we've got a majority of the board interested in pursuing a conversation with regard to a San Marcos School District Police Force. Any other questions or discussion before we take a vote? All in favor, please raise your hand. Go with the board. 7, 0 opposed. So do we have 3 volunteers to serve on that committee?
I volunteer to serve on this committee.
I would like to volunteer also.
So we've got Mr. Shanks,
I would volunteer to be part of that as well.
I think we can have more. I think if more board members want to participate, I think that's valuable.
but you can't.
We can't have more.
You can only have 3. Because it would be quorum.
Okay.
You could have more as long as you don't take action and as we post every meeting. I mean, we did it for the bond. You could have more participation as long as you don't take action at those meetings.
Did you want to serve on that, Ms. Halsey?
I think I'm happy to keep it with 3 people and have the recommendation and also the comparison come from that committee. And I think that it would be great to have the superintendent appoint not only our director of security, but also some of our high school and maybe elementary, middle school teachers so that we get their impressions and perspective as well.
Okay. So we've got our 3 committee members. And we can move on to consideration of TASB Board of Directors endorsement. You all saw a nomination for a lady that is wanting our endorsement. Let me find her.
While you find it, can I go ahead and make the motion to have Ms. Mary Jane Hedrick as our representative?
Yes. So you're making the motion that we endorse Mary Jane Hendrick?
Hedrick?
And I want to.
And I second.
Ma'am?
Second.
I second that.
Okay. She seconds it. And I want to thank our industrious secretary of the superintendent that put all the information on this meeting that y'all voted for the delegate assembly for Ms. Villalpando and myself to attend. There's information on the delegate assembly, And it starts with a grassroots meeting like in January, and then they keep having meetings throughout the year. And I'm glad she included that information so that the new board members could see what is involved in the delegate assembly, because one day we won't go and somebody else has to go. And so that way you all can start looking ahead for when the time comes that it will be your turn to represent SMCISD at the delegate assembly at TASB.
And I have something else to mention.
Okay.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
It's concerning, well, it's concerning our appointee, Mary Jane Hedrick.
Okay.
And she's also a member of our Central Texas School Board, and she's been very active. Clem and I have had the opportunity to go to these meetings, and Ms. Hedrick is very involved. She even came to listen to Dr. Cardona speak at our, what event was that?
Sorry,
It was the workforce.
The workforce.
That would have been nice.
But it was, she's very interested in our school board activities, and is a very active participant in the Central Texas, and she is also a member of the TASB board. So she's a well-rounded person and is very interested in our school education. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Okay, so now we're ready to vote for the endorsement. Ms. Kedrick, am I saying her name right? Kedrick?
Hedrick.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0 opposed. So we'll sign an endorsement for her. Academics, consider approval of the 2023 and 2024 Student Code of Conduct. Any discussion on the Student Code of Conduct before we call for
I would ask if any changes could be pointed out, because comparison to the previous, I think that's what she's doing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you in charge of that?
Good evening, School Board. Elena Villanueva, I'm the Director of Student Services. And so you have all received a copy of the 2023-2024 Student Code of Conduct. And so we use that model, and it uses the TASB model. And we also have the legislative updates from the 88th legislative session. Primarily with the HB 114-114, where it places vaping has been added to the marijuana and to the THC, where it becomes a mandatory DAP placement for students. And so we've made the changes on that in the Student Code of Conduct. It also removes, it also lets us know that if DAP is at capacity, that we need to go ahead and consider placements that are non-violent, such as marijuana, THC, e-cigarettes. And so what that means is that although it tells us that students are to be placed at DAP, if DAP is at capacity, then we have to go ahead and hold on to the other students that are not being violent to allow the violent offenses to go to DAP. We also had a change with HB 3928, and that lets us know that students that are placed in DAP, we must provide them with information about a full evaluation for special education so that can be considered. Along with that, you also received a policy update on FO local, and that is just really to align our FNG local, which is for DAP appeal placement. I think making that change will allow our families to really make an appeal request being more efficient, as it requires 3 days from the placement that they are able to make that appeal process with the campus principal at the level 1. And they must receive a response within 5 days. After that, if they're still not satisfied with that response, then they can go ahead and make that appeal at the level 2 with the superintendent designee. and then they'll get a response within 5 days. Following the FNG local, the number of days that parents have to wait on getting a response, it's a little bit long, and many times the placements at DAEP are extremely short, that by the time we kind of go through the process, the FO local will allow families to kind of go through that process, and also allow our administrators to be able to just have more clarity, and in case they want to go ahead and appeal that decision on discipline.
What's current capacity right now for DAEP?
75 students.
Okay.
And after the first week of school, how many students do we have in DAEP?
So currently we had about 15 that were kind of finishing out the prior school year. Yes, we had about 15.
Thank you.
It's the beginning of year is always really, really small. Yes.
It'd be nice to stay that small, right?
Yes, it would. It would be really, really
How many
nice.
staff do we have over there at the DAEP?
So we have 4 core teachers, and one that serves as an elective teacher. And so between them, that's where we get the 75, because each one of them can have up to 15 students per teacher.
Any other questions? I think it's a very good code of conduct. I asked today for the school handbook because I wanted to see what exactly we said about dress code. That's a topic that some of us have discussed, and I'm glad that the principal is the person that is responsible for making sure that the dress code is followed.
No, yes, and we actually made just some changes to that because we wanted to, first of all, make sure that that the handbook really looked at the individuality of students, right? Because we know that certain students are, just they're middle schoolers, they're teenagers. And so we wanted to take that and to really take into consideration that we are wanting to follow a dress code that is going to be aimed at safety and ensuring that, anything that is gang related or anything that's just not appropriate in that sense, that each campus, each campus team determines what issues are they seeing within their dress code so that they can address it. And so I know right now really focusing on ensuring that the whole torso area is covered, that it really is priority, right? Because we want to make sure that both young ladies and young men, come to school feeling safe without getting, told inappropriate comments based on, certain things that may be showing or not. And so I know that campus principals really want to emphasize that. And other things that are not really, we can live with a lot of things, and we want the kids to be here, and we also know that also the trends are different, but there are some things that campuses really want to emphasize within their campus.
I did have a question about the capacity for DAEP, and if capacity is reached and then so nonviolent offenders, vaping and those sorts of things no longer report to the campus, what will the strategy be, and will it apply to all of those students?
And so currently when we have a DAP placement, the process is that campus administrators will kind of run their investigation and report the incident, and then they run it by myself, and if I'm not available, then it's with Ms. Velasquez, because again, she knows everything about discipline. And so we kind of look through the information to see that we are really giving students due process, and really identifying if additional support should have been implemented so that, we provide the students with the supports they need. Yes, discipline, but really more about the supports that they need. And so there are times that as I go through the information, Ms. Velasquez and I will go back to the campus and identify that, hey, maybe there are a couple of other things that we could have done. And so sometimes some of those DAP placements we send back to the campus so that the campus can try additional supports. And really that is the goal, that all the DAPs come, whether they're mandatory or discretionary, that they come to someone that's not on the campus, so that we're just looking really at the processes that we're following.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm ready for a motion.
They would keep the unsafe kids there.
Okay, thank you.
Ready for a motion?
I move to approve the student code of conduct as presented.
Second.
Second from Dr. Salmi. That's all it says, 2023, 2024, Student Code of Conduct.
As
Any further
presented.
questions? We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good presentation, Ms. Villanueva. Operations, consider adoption of the resolution to identify hazardous conditions within 2 miles of school campus.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Dr. Cardona. Anthony Shields, Director of Transportation. In your board books, you should have the presentation for the hazardous routes. I will start the conversation off with there's no changes that we have made in the last few years. So that's always a good thing, but I do know that there are some questions about what actually is hazardous routes, so we'll give just a little bit of a brief overview, and then if you have any questions, you can ask. Each year, San Marcos CISD Board of Trustees determines which routes in our district qualify as hazardous routes using the criteria from the Texas Education Code. The law states that hazardous conditions exist where no walkway is provided and children must walk along or across a freeway, expressway, an underpass, an overpass, a bridge, an uncontrolled major traffic artery, an industrial or commercial area, and other comparable conditions. Students who live farther than 2 miles from school receive bus transportation as a whole. In most cases, students who live within 2 miles of their school are considered to live in the not eligible for transportation zone or hazardous zones and do not receive bus transportation. There is an important exception to the not eligible for transportation rule or zone requirement for students living within 2 miles of their school. Students who live on what is considered a hazardous route, meaning they meet the criteria that we spoke of before, will receive transportation. As our district grows, I do anticipate that we will have more hazardous route areas, and the list will change. Sometimes new home construction can require the addition of new routes because of the hazardous conditions. Other times, improvements to the pedestrian infrastructure can eliminate what was once considered hazardous, allowing more children to walk to school if parents do choose so. It's important to note that through TEA, through the transportation allotment formula, the district is only allowed to claim 10% of the hazardous routes that we do have. Here in our district, we actually have 26% of hazardous routes. So we are only allowed to claim, we are only allowed to claim 10% of that through our TEA transportation formula. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions on hazardous routes?
I just want to compliment Anthony. This is the first time since I've been here we actually have maps and stuff, so he did a great job, and he doesn't like talking in public, but he did an amazing job, so
Thank you.
we appreciate him.
I move that we approve the resolution to identify hazardous conditions within the 2 miles of school campuses as presented so eloquently in our board book by Mr. Shields.
I'll
Second.
that. Did I hear a second from Lopez? She
Second.
already said that. Okay, motion made by Dr. Sami, seconded by Ms. Lopez. All in favor, raise your hand. 7, 0 opposed. Consideration possible action of ranking of various professional services firms that provided qualifications in response to the request for qualifications regarding testing and balancing services, geotechnical services, materials testing services, survey services, civil engineering services, mechanical, electrical, plumbing services, commissioning services, and structural engineering services, and delegation of authority to the superintendent or designee to assign individual projects. Mr. Doyle, you got something for us?
Yes, on page 185 in the board book, you said it best. And I won't repeat. We released an RFQ in order to obtain entities to build our pool of contractors, if you will, entities who can provide these services. As we move through the bond and other construction projects, we need a team, if you will, of vetted, procured entities, so that way we can go to obtain those services. It's a recommendation of the board, or it's a recommendation of the administration that the board approve the rank as presented, and that the board delegate authority to the superintendent designee, as stated in page 185.
I move that we approve item 8C2 as written.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, motion made by Ms. Kane, second by Dr. Salmi. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0 opposed. Next is safety.
We're done.
Finance.
Finance, because I thought, we've got Mr. Doyle up here. He must be doing finance.
Yep. On page 199, you can see, oh, did I jump ahead? I'm sorry.
We're ready.
Okay, on page 199, you can see that we have an action item. This ties back into the recapture election right in May that we passed. We still have to form what is called a contract with TEA and submit it through their online portal, notifying them that our plan is to pay back our recapture via the daily attendance credits with the state.
Mr. Doyle, will we continue to have to approve this every year despite
Yes.
the recapture?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I move that we approve the purchase of attendance credits as presented in the board book.
Second, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Kane?
And to add to that would be to delegate the contractual authority to the superintendent.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0
No, no, sir.
opposed. We're now ready to go into closed session as,
The budget,
I'm sorry?
the budget amendments.
Oh, okay, we're gonna do amendments next.
So there's two board amendments, they're not moving any money out of fund balance, they're just moving money from within functions. And then one is for special ed, where we were able to receive funds from a high-cost grant for expenditures from last year.
I move to approve the budget amendments.
I'll second that.
Motion by Ms. Kane, second by Ms. Lopez, that we approve the budget amendments. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. 7-0 opposed. Thank you. Now we'll go into closed session as authorized by Texas Government Code 551.001 and by Section 551.076, deliberation regarding safety and security, including safety personnel systems and/or devices, or security audit. Got a motion from Mr. Shanks and a second from, was it Lopez or?
No, it's me, Dr. Song.
From Dr. Sami. All in favor, raise your hand. Ms. Halsey, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
For the job y'all do all the time.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you.
That's Saturday is AM.
Is it 8 or 9?
9 a.m. I do
Tell
not
me
like.
8. I don't want to hear 8.
9, that's fine. It's here.
In this room?
Yes.